She wasn't his first, and she wouldn't be his last. According to his murder diary, she may have been his number 2. Tiffany Sessions was studying at the University of Florida in 1989 when he picked her off of the walking trail, and she was never seen again. He had been sentenced to life in prison March of 1976, but he would con his way out to kill again. We know he had at least 3 victims. 24 years later, a serial killer's little black book lends clues to what happened to this beautiful college co-ed. How could our justice system have failed Tiffany so badly? Why wasn't this monster kept behind bars where he belonged? Unfortunately, there's still no justice for Tiffany's family. The killer died in prison without confessing to her murder, and now all we have are the clues in this little black book. What happened to Tiffany Sessions, and will her family ever find answers? This case is brought to you by... Behind every true crime story is a shattered life. I have raised awareness for over 300 cases and have worked directly with the family members on many of them. This book highlights 40 case files. Some of them are famous, many of them are obscure. There's missing persons cases, unsolved homicides, serial killers, and more. Check out Shattered today to learn more. Today we're talking about a very stressful, tedious case. It's the Tiffany Sessions murder mystery. Now, Tiffany Sessions was 20 years old. She was studying at the University of Florida. She had come back from the holiday break. She had got on a fitness kick because, like a lot of college girls, they were wanting to get in shape before bikini season. You know, they wanted to get in shape before the summer. So she had started a fitness routine of power walking every evening after class. So somewhere between 3 and 6 p.m., she went on a power walk. Now, she went a very specific route. Her roommate knew this route, knew exactly how long it took her, and knew she would be home within an hour. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is kind of their thing that they had worked out. But on February 9th, 1989, Tiffany Sessions never made it back. She never made it back to the roommate. Now, the roommate starts to worry because Tiffany is very punctual and she knows that she should have been back. So her roommate gets in the car and drives the route that they had already worked this out before. I'm going to be here, then here, then here, and I'll be back. And so she drove the route. And Tiffany was nowhere to be found. They thought maybe Tiffany had fallen and hurt her ankle or something and needed help and couldn't get back. Whatever the case is, she drove the route. She was not there. She was not back at the apartment when she got back from driving the route, so she calls the police. Now, that was 1989, and Tiffany Sessions has never been seen or heard of again. Now, she has a family dynamic that is very public. You can see this. I think this is probably not a good thing, and I encourage everyone that is in this situation, victims, family members, not to do this, not to put your family dynamic so public, because you have a mother and a father who very much care for their daughter, but then you have he's a powerhouse mega businessman who's used to running corporations, and then you have her, and they had been separated and divorced since Tiffany was young. And so you get on there even today, even though this case is from 1989, and a lot of the big things you hear is the parents butting heads, and it's just 2 massive different personality styles, 2 victims who are desperate to find their baby girl. But what happens is, someone like me, I'm trying to listen to a seminar given by one of the parents, and all the 45-minute seminar is bashing the other parent and how the other parent's doing this and how the other parent's doing that. So when you're in this situation, you're already going through a hideously horrible situation. The last thing that needs to be done is bring that difficult family dynamic to the surface. It's a time to put all of that aside. You don't have to, be best friends with that person, but you have to put that aside, because even to this day, after all of these years, when you look up Tiffany Sessions, you are going to find stuff in the article uh, that is about how bad the parents are clashing. And so we don't want to, when you're raising awareness about these cases, you don't want to let any of that friction come in, because what happens is it takes away from the main headline, which is this beautiful blonde-headed co-ed that is disappeared. And so what makes this even worse is there is no evidence. There's nothing. There's no tips. There's no murder weapon. There's no crime scene. There's no body. They have nothing to go on. The police have nothing to go on. And it takes several years. I believe it took, what did I say, 15 years? Or was it 20? Let me look up my thing here. But it takes more than a decade. I think maybe 2 decades. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, I think it
But
was 20.
yeah, 2 decades. And they finally get a tip, but it's from a scenario that you would not believe. You would not believe that this is actually the way it works. So let me look this up. Okay. Let me give you a picture too. Let me open a picture here, and I'm going to share this picture. They find a person who they believe is actually her killer. But by the time they find him, he is on his deathbed dying of lung cancer, and he's in a coma, and the police go and try their best to wake him up, and they cannot. So basically, there is a serial killer that was in the area, and they find his notebook, his little black book, that had all of his details of all the gruesome things he had done to women. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of everything, they see a number 2 and the date 2/9/1989. It doesn't have any other details. But right in the middle of this book, there is the date of Tiffany Sessions' murder, or Tiffany Sessions' disappearance. And so that makes them suspicious. Then they find out that he was in the area. They find out his past. They find out what he's done to women in the past. They find out his timeline. And Tiffany, if she was actually his victim, would have been number 2. Now, what is massively disturbing, this man was in prison for life and then conned his way into parole after 10 years. So he was in prison for life for brutally murdering and raping this woman and admitting to it. And then he ends up conning his way out of jail. And we know that Tiffany Sessions went missing. We know there's at least one other woman for sure that he killed. DNA has proved it, and he has admitted it. There was another 19-year-old woman that he almost killed, but she was able to keep a cool head and kind of con her way out of the situation. She is the reason why we know who this person is today. So let's backtrack just a little bit. Cricket, jump in. I'm going to share my screen. Cricket, I know you have some things to talk about. You talk while I find the screen I'm looking for.
Okay. I want to touch base on the parents bashing.
Yeah.
The first case I was on, the things the father was saying, we had to take as a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And he had nothing to do with his son's disappearance.
Yeah.
So you can't just blame this, blame that. Because,
right.
Like you said, it takes away from the important thing, which is finding this person.
Right. And so you also have a person who is used to running corporations. Okay. So he's very meticulous and ordered in the way he does things. He's also used to being in control. And so then you've got someone who is the opposite of that. So you've got 2 personalities clashing, so that's difficult enough. But when you add that to a cold case, all you're doing is destroying the cold case. Okay. So here's a timeline. Can you girls see the timeline?
Yes.
Okay. There. So the man's name we're talking about is Paul Rolls. Now, Paul Rolls was born April 28th, 1948. By March 29th of 1972, His neighbor, Linda Fida, I guess that's how you say her name, was murdered in Miami, Florida. Now, Rolls was what I would call a bona fide psychopath. Now, there's a psychopathy checklist that you can go over. It's 40 points. It's 20 questions, and you can rate on a scale how much psychopathic tendencies someone has. Now, he has nearly all of them. So, but the thing is one of the things you look for in a psychopath is you look for their childhood. What were they like in their childhood? And this is a man who said he's had these sexual fantasies and these deviant sexual fantasies since he was a child. When he was a 12-year-old boy, he was literally stealing panties from his friends' mothers and wearing them around the house and doing all kinds of ungoshly things with these underwear and then burning them. And he got caught. Okay, so it started there, and it began, and it became an obsession. And then he started stalking women. Then he started molesting people, and then he just progressed on and on. And then he raped people. So he had all of these tendencies. Well, then he got married when he was 20 to a woman named Linda, and he would later say he thought that would kind of tone back his fantasies, and it did for a little while until they moved in next door to Linda Fida. Linda Fida caught his eye, and he began stalking Linda Fida. Well, Linda Fida, he decided he wanted Linda Fida. He was going to take Linda Fida. He busts in her door, and he assaults her, and he stabs her several times with several of her own kitchen knives, breaking them off in her. And he still wasn't sure she was dead, so he drowned her in the bathtub and left her there. Okay. That was his first killing, he says. And so, but he goes next door to his own house. His wife was gone that night, so she couldn't verify where he was or what he was doing. And so his first murder was next door. Well, there was some band-aids that were left. And they said they found a toe print and blood and all this stuff. And so when the police came around to his house to question him and see if he heard anything, whatever, he had bandages on his two big toes. So they automatically made them suspicious. They brought him in, and within an hour he had confessed to everything. Okay, so he is sentenced to life in prison for the Fida murder on March 24th of 1976. Okay, so he's sentenced to life in prison. He should not be out. Unfortunately, December of 1985, he is paroled out. Okay, so he literally spends less than 10 years in prison. And this is what really I find disturbing about this case, is not only did he say, that he had all these tendencies for women. He tried to use the insanity plea because he said, I've had these fantasies my whole life and I can't control them. Okay. So they didn't agree with that. He may have had those fantasies, but he still knew what he was doing was wrong. So that took that insanity plea off the table. So he's literally stacked up the deck and said, I've done this all my life. I've stalked women. I've raped women. I've now killed women. I can't control these desires. I can't control these fantasies. And then somehow 10 years later into a life sentence, he gets paroled out. Well, you will find that he was a somewhat educated, kind of had a higher IQ inmate. So they had him in prison working in the accounting office. Well, he was working underneath a prison staff member. Well, this female prison staff member decided to take a liking to him, and they started a relationship. And she began to, they say she began to coach him on how to approach the parole board and what to say and how to convince them that he has recovered from these things and all of this thing. So within 10 years, he's got a girlfriend on the Department of Corrections, a girlfriend. She helps him get out of jail. And if that's not disturbing enough, she brings him home with her and her two teenage daughters. Now he allegedly beat one of the teenage daughters, and she let him off the hook. He even admitted to having fantasies about her other teenage daughter, and she still didn't get rid of this sack of crap. She continues on living with this man until he starts spending a big bunch of money trying to find his ex-wife. Now, see, when he was killing Linda next door, he was actually married to a Linda, and that Linda actually went into hiding when all of this came out. She divorced him when he went to prison, and she went into hiding, and he spent the rest of his life trying to find her, and she did a good job. He never did find her. But so this woman, this jailhouse staff member, decided it was a smart thing to do to start a relationship with an inmate, thought it was a smart thing to do to help him get out of prison, thought it was a smart thing to do to bring him into the house with her two teenage daughters, and thought it was okay that he beat one and fantasized about the other. But she finally did decide to leave him when he decided he was going to try to track down his ex-wife. So I don't know how that makes any sense to anybody. Tammy, I feel like there should be some kind of criminal I think there should be some kind of criminal repercussions to that woman. Don't you?
Yeah.
I mean,
Definitely.
she stacked the deck so he could get out. And she had all of his records. And she knew all of the fantasy stuff, all of the, all of that stacks up on the psychopathy checklist massively.
Isn't she supposed to be trained? Don't they train them to watch out for people like that?
Well, she should be.
Like his
Yeah,
tactics. I thought that was part of their standard training.
Absolutely.
Some serial killers especially are like top of the top dog when it comes to manipulating people.
Oh yeah. And see, that's part of the psychopathy checklist. How charming, superficially charming this person is. And so this is where so I guess his first wife's name was Linda Schaefer. Her last name was Schaefer. He never did find her. Okay. He never did find her. So I'm trying to see if I can find, did either one of you find his second wife's name? For some reason, I was thinking it was Karen, but I'm looking on this paper and I don't see it. But anyway, so his second wife, they did get married, but his second wife decides he needs to leave, and so she kicks him out. And but that doesn't last very long. She decides a little bit later that he can come back. Well, in the meantime, let me tell you what Paul was up to, and I'm going to go back to that timeline. So he's paroled and moves in with this Department of Corrections officer. Okay, so he's paroled in 1985. In 1988, he moves to Gainesville, Florida, and that's with this corrections officer. A few months later, in the same town, on February 9th is when Tiffany Sessions goes missing. Now, what we find out later is Paul Rolls had noticed her because he delivered scaffolding to a construction site that was within her walking area, her little path that she walked. Okay. So we know that he's seen her. We also know that he had said things to inmates that he had done this before. Now, what happens is nobody knows that Tiffany is connected to anybody else. So until Elizabeth Foster is reported missing. Now, Elizabeth Foster was reported missing. Her body is found not too far from where Tiffany went missing. Okay. Now, DNA would take a long time before it was actually to the point where they could actually pin it to a specific person, because we're talking in the 80s and early 90s. So anyways,
I think, didn't he own a construction site?
No, he delivered scaffolding to the construction site.
Okay,
he was kind of a runner.
Yeah, he had the access.
Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. He brutally raped and murdered Elizabeth Foster buried her body not too far from where Tiffany Sessions went missing. Okay. So they still couldn't figure it out. This is in 1992. Okay. 1994. Rolls by then has decided he's going back to his second wife, the prison worker, the jail worker, whatever.
Are you talking about the prison worker?
Yeah.
Her name was Catherine.
Catherine.
Oh,
Thank you,
Catherine.
Catherine. Okay, so he went back to Catherine, and Catherine was bringing him in. Catherine said, "Yes, you can come in. You can come back in and move in with me in Jacksonville." So he's moving from Gainesville to Jacksonville. So he's in the process of moving his stuff. Okay, he's in the process of moving his stuff, and he happens to notice his wife's neighbor. She's a 19-year-old girl, and I don't have her name written down. Why don't I have her name written down? If you girls can find that, let me know. But anyway, so he sees, while he's moving his crap back into his wife's house, she's welcoming him back, and nobody can understand why, but he's coming back into the home with the wife and the two teenage daughters. He goes and he notices the 19-year-old neighbor out sunbathing in her swimsuit, and then he starts stalking her. So he kidnaps her, and he ties her up. He puts her in his car, and he's like, "I'm not going to do this here. I'm going to take her back to Gainesville." So he literally stops for hamburgers on the way and all this stuff. He literally gets her back to Gainesville, into the place that the place that he was living, that he was moving out of. And she, he assaults her periodically and molests her all along the way. And she tries to stay calm. And the moment they get settled back in his place in Gainesville, she cons him into saying, "Okay, can I have something to eat?" And so she cons him into going into the other room and making her some food. Okay. And then when he does that, she races out the door. Because of that girl's bravery, she ran and got help and went to the cops. She was willing to testify against him. She gave DNA samples. She went through all of the things. She had to face him in court. She did all those things. And because of that, they actually finally got Paul Rolls arrested. Now, because of the DNA and all of the things that she went ahead and did, and we're talking about a 19-year-old girl, and we're talking, she's still very young. She went ahead and faced all that and did all of that. And because all of that stuff was on record, by the time the DNA is, the science catches up in 2012, because of what she did, the DNA finally matches to Rolls. Okay. So here's where we really get to, we really need to understand, Rolls has done all of these things, and he's got away with it for so long because the DNA science is just not there. But how does this relate back to Tiffany Sessions? Okay, so he gets in prison for the 19-year-old that he just, tortured. So he's in prison. And then in 2013, Detective Allen decides to interview Rolls in his prison cell about Tiffany Sessions. And so here's the problem with it, though. By then, this man was dying of lung cancer and was on his deathbed and had slipped into a coma. And the detective could not rouse him to question him. And then the guy died a short time later. So, but he was able to collect all of his belongings out of his prison cell. And one of those belongings was a black kind of an address book, a notebook that he kept all of the information of the things that he had done to women. And in that notebook, right in the middle, there was no description, which was kind of odd, but right in the middle, it says number 2. It was a number sign and the number 2. And then it says February 9th, 1989. And so we begin to think, okay, maybe this is the guy, because if you count everything out, she would have been his number 2. And so the problem is they've never found Tiffany's body. But some more information, some kind of disturbing information that you might find. There were several things that they have that can link him to her, even though they haven't found her body. So I'm going to pause there. We're going to jump onto our commercial break, and we'll be right back, and we'll talk about all the things that ties this man to Tiffany Sessions. And so we'll be right back after this message.
Darkness settled around him as he locked the law office door. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, he knew he was next. He'd stood against the Dixie Mafia's machine in Phoenix City, and he would pay dearly for it. 28 times blood had been shed without justice. Law enforcement, judges, and local politicians were all connected to the criminal organization, and they had sucked the life out of the community for decades. Who was he to think he could escape their grasp? The people tried to make a stand and voted him into office, but Albert Patterson would never take the position. As he walked to his car, a gunman emerged from the shadows. Patterson felt a cold steel barrel shoved against his teeth. The projectile tore through his skull, but the gunman's fury wasn't finished. 2 more bullets ripped through his body as he fell to the ground. The sacrifice bled out on the street as the gunman hurried away. The faint streetlight glinted off the badge on his belt.
Okay, so we're back. Thank you for watching that short commercial break. So what actually ties this man to Tiffany Sessions? So we've got that odd little note in his murder diary, basically is what that was. We also know that he was in that area. We also know that his possible third victim, her body was found near the same walking track that Tiffany took. We also know that Tiffany had a very high-end golden Rolex watch that her father had given her. She never took it off. She wore it everywhere she went. And she had it on that night. Now, they've never found her. They've never found the watch. Now, of course, we're talking a part of Florida that, it's kind of a paradise for serial killers because there's crocodiles, there's bear, there's panthers, there's every kind of thing to help dispose of a body is out there in the woods. But they most likely wouldn't eat a Rolex watch, But the thing with it is the watch was never found. So, but just before he decided to kidnap the 19-year-old neighbor, Catherine, his wife, got a gift from her ex, and it was a golden Rolex. So she got this beautiful golden watch from this man who's trying to convince her that he needs to come back into her life, and she takes it. And so here's another question. If you have an ex, you have a criminal, boyfriend. You have an ex-inmate boyfriend. You have a killer boyfriend. You have, I don't know what else you want to call him. He was a murderer, a rapist, a sexual sadist. You got the gist. He doesn't have a nice job. Okay, he doesn't have a well-paying job, and he brings you a golden Rolex. Is that not suspicious to you?
Well, I'd be questioning it right away. I'm like, where'd you get this from? Who'd you steal it from?
This from? How did you steal this? Did you get it out of I'm like, how? This man didn't have a job that provided an income that would give him the ability to legally, ethically get a golden watch to give to her. So I'm wondering, who is this Catherine person? And what is her issues? Because I'm sitting there going, she's obviously got some issues if she's willing to put up with this kind of crap. So, so there's another thing that ties back to, now they did get a hold of one of the teenage daughters, and she was able to verify that, yes, that he gave her a golden watch, and she pawned it immediately. And so I'm like, okay. I would probably take it to the police station before I pawn it, because if you pawn it and it's stolen merchandise, you could get in trouble.
Yeah.
So it's like nothing this woman is doing makes any more sense than what this man is doing. So I'm like,
No. And him giving her a Rolex, because I've seen this before with serial killers. They can relive what they did every time he sees her with the watch on.
Absolutely. So he's not giving away his trophy. He's actually going to see it more often, because he's going to have to sneak around and hide to see all of his trophies that he's taken off of his victims. But if he gives it to his wife, then every time she wears it, he gets his little high, you know. And so this is what we need to understand. Then, to make it even worse, in prison, somebody was talking about his third victim, and he's like, yeah, well, I've done this before. And he's like, I did this to another co-ed. So he said he had killed another co-ed. Well, the first lady he killed wasn't a co-ed. So we know that he was talking about someone else. He had killed another college kid. And so he's practically told somebody about it. He was in the area. His third body that his third victim's body was found in her area, but they still haven't found the body. And so I've had some people come up and say, well, it couldn't have been him, because he confessed immediately to the first crime. He didn't hide the body very well the first time around. The possible third victim, she was found, and she was hidden better, but not as good as Tiffany Sessions. Why is Tiffany Sessions not found if the same guy hid all three bodies? Well,
they learn as they go.
Here's the thing. Body one, he said he didn't break into that house planning on killing her. He blindfolded her, and then she lifted the blindfold, seen who he was, and then he went into a rage and killed her. I don't know if I buy it or not. But either way, that was his first time around. He was sloppy. He didn't know what he was doing. He was in a hurry. He just left it all there. Okay. Second time around, by this time, he had spent 10 years in the can. So he had plenty of time to figure out what he did wrong the first time to get caught. Okay. So the second time around, he's going to be more cautious. Okay. Now, the third and fourth victims that he had, he was getting a little bit cocky, because he's like, okay, nobody's found my second one. They don't even know that I've done this. They're never going to find her. And so he slacks off a little bit on the third victim. And he slacks off even more on the fourth victim, because he thinks he's big man. He's caught it. He's got it now. So you can kind of see the progression of the mindset. At first he really screwed up. So he did really good job hiding the body the second time. And then he gets a little arrogant and starts making more mistakes. And so this is where I don't feel like, because the bodies were found easier and harder, I don't think that actually means it was done by a different individual. No. I think it all still points to the same sick mind that did the first one.
I've been asked several times, how can you hide a body? There is a lot of places that you can hide a body that person may never be found.
Well, you're also talking about, like I said, okay, if you're hiding a body in Missouri, you don't find a whole lot of wild hogs or anything like that in Missouri. You do find some bears, and you might find an occasional mountain lion, but you've got deer and fox and things like that in rural Missouri. Down in Florida, they've got bear. They've got mountain lions. They've got actual panthers down there. They've got alligators. They got swamp. You've got all kinds of things that lend itself to what a serial killer needs to get rid of a body.
Yeah.
And so to me, the location really makes it, unfortunately, easier to do. And
alligators and pigs, like, people think that, they're going to devour everything. It doesn't work like that, because where's the clothes, watch, something would be found.
But when you're in a swamp, though, that makes everything harder to be found. And then you've
True.
also, when you're in a swamp, you've got fish wildlife and things that do
Right.
things as well. So I don't think that they would probably take everything as a whole, but I would say if you had smaller wildlife, you wouldn't have lost the watch. And then I just find it odd that there was a golden watch given to his significant other years later, trying to persuade her into getting back into his life. And so this is what we got today. Tammy, have I missed anything that we were going to talk about?
I was wondering about the psychiatrist that he was talking to after a second marriage, and he was separated from Catherine. He was talking to a psychologist and telling him that, well, a psychiatrist, they said that those fantasies were back again. He was having trouble controlling and everything. They're not supposed to report anything like that, or?
Well, see, and that's the thing. They've got the doctor-patient privilege and all that kind of thing. But I'm sitting here going, at some point, there needs to be a line drawn with that.
Yeah,
Because yes, you have
putting-
doctor-patient privilege, but you've also, your doctor-patient privilege has also allowed this man to continue murdering and raping and stalking women.
yeah,
So
and I thought
when does that
psychiatrists, if the person is a danger to themselves or others, that they can speak up.
Right. And see, that's the thing. We're talking about all kinds of different rules and regulations back in the 80s, but in my thought, and those of you that are watching for the first time, I appreciate you watching. So you may not know what we're talking about, but a lot of my viewers I see on tonight have watched for a while, so you'll remember these videos we've talked about. But we are actually actively kind of following the Richard Glossop case out of Oklahoma. Now, Richard Glossop has spent years and decades on death row, and the only evidence against him was a crackhead who admitted to killing somebody. And then they said, well, did you have any help? And he said no. And then they're like, well, we'll take the death penalty off the table if you tell us you had help. And he goes, okay, I had help. And they're like, well, who? And he goes, Richard. Okay. That is the only evidence against Richard Glossop. There's no circumstantial evidence, nothing. And Oklahoma has fed this man his last meal 3 times. He has been fighting to get off a death row for decades. And I'm like, Oklahoma, you go to jail, they're going to kill you no matter what you do, whether you're innocent or not. They will kill you. But then you go to Florida, you can brutally murder and rape and destroy women, stab women and break knives off in their bodies, and leave them in gosh awful places and do terrible, horrible things. And you can have a life sentence, but you're going to get out of jail in 10 years. So I'm sitting going, why is it so drastically different between the states? I don't think it should be drastically different. I think if you have life sentence, you have a life sentence. I do believe that there are certain situations where you might get paroled and 40 years or whatever for blah, 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 depending on what you got a life sentence for. But this man didn't change. This man was actively saying he had fantasies. This man was actively telling you, hey, I've had this since childhood. I can't control it. Hey, I have, why is it so different? How does someone get out of prison after 10 years after doing this and getting a life sentence for it? And why didn't he get the death sentence? Because Florida put a lot of people to death in that decade. So I'm like, why didn't he get the death sentence? Why, after he did this and confessed to all of it and confessed that this was an ongoing problem, why didn't they keep him? For one, I mean, how could he? And I really think, and what most people think, hi, Barbara, thanks for signing on. What most people think that follow this case, they think that that girlfriend actually coached him. and told him what to say when he got to the parole board, and told him how to present himself and what not to say. And she actually was the one that helped him get out. Well, since she helped him get out, Tiffany Sessions went missing. His second, Elizabeth, I think was her name. His second co-ed was brutally murdered and killed. And a 19-year-old girl was brutally attacked, and she kind of conned her way out of it. So we know of 3 more women that had to suffer at this man's hand because that prison worker started a relationship with someone she wasn't supposed to. And then she helped him get out. So I still think there should be some kind of criminal liability laid at her feet, laid at the feet of the psychiatrist, because if they hadn't done that, if they hadn't crossed, there's rules for a reason.
Yeah. Those deaths
You
are
know,
on their hands just as much as
they are.
Yeah.
They are. You know, and this is what I feel like, you know, this is the okay, I'm going to be mean. Here's the sorry sack of crap. I'm going to share a picture of this sorry sack of garbage here. I don't mean to be mean, but this is
and it's sickening what goes on in prisons. Like, people don't realize they actually, some prisons, sex traffic women out.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the man we're talking about. This is Paul Rolls. He was kind of a beach bum type vibe in the 80s and early 90s. And he killed Linda. He killed Linda when he was 20. And then he was out by the time he was 30. Tiffany Sessions was right after he got out, and then Elizabeth. And so this is the man that we're talking about. Now, I don't understand why anyone would think that was attractive.
Yeah, right.
But
and there's just certain
even if you did, you have his case file on your freaking desk.
Yeah.
You know, you are his boss. You are his boss, and he is an inmate. You have access to see all of the brutal, horrible things that he's done to women. You know that he's high on the psychopathy checklist. You know that his charm is only superficial. You have all this education. You know exactly who he is and what he has done. And yet you are going to have a relationship with him?
And you're going to put your 2 daughters at risk?
Well, he was beating one and fantasizing about the other.
Yep.
And she still didn't leave him for that, and she let him come back. And so I'm sitting here going, that woman needs help. I think she's gone now, but I'm like, that woman needs some serious psychological help.
And if nothing else, she was not protecting her children, and they should have been taken away.
Absolutely.
Something.
DFS.
Yeah.
So she didn't choose to kill those women. No. But she chose to help the man who did get out of jail so he could. And so I really feel like, this may be harsh, but I feel like there should be some criminal liability laid at her feet because she chose to do this. And, I think she's deceased now. And I don't mean any disrespect to the daughters that would still be around. But I'm saying she crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. And because of that, there were some severe, horrible consequences, and her 2 daughters suffered, so I'm like, there should be some more checks and balances in our system to make sure that don't happen. For one, and we talked about this before we went on the air. He should not have had access to work with another woman. He should have got a job where there was a male supervisor. Exactly. They should not have put him as a predator towards women in a job that had a woman boss. You know, um,
So
you know,
they just let him slip through those cracks.
mhm. So I'm like, we need more checks and balances in our system. We need more checks and balances. And I think over the last, several decades, they have been trying to make progress towards this. But on the other hand, we talk about cases every week that you're like, how did they get by with this for so long? And I think part of it, and this is where I think legislation needs to come in. I don't know what kind of legislation. I haven't, designed any theories on it. There needs to be some legislation that levels the playing field a little bit between all of the states, because in one state you can get away with brutal homicide, a life sentence, and get out in 10 years. The next one, you can get accused by someone else and there be no evidence, and then they're going to put you on death row and they're going to fight to kill you for 30 years. So there's such a drastic difference between the states. Something needs to happen to level them out a bit. If you get a 10-year sentence in Chicago, it should mean the same thing as if you get a 10-year sentence in Florida. If you get a life sentence in Missouri, it should mean the same thing as if you get a life sentence in Texas. I think there needs to be something to level all of this out, because we live in the same country. It
Yeah.
shouldn't be so drastically different. And if you get a life sentence, it's a life sentence.
Nope.
And
And
I feel like
what
if you get a
bothers
life
me,
sentence, now I don't say that you could never get out of that, because if you are sentenced, I've been working on some cases where they're innocents, with the Innocence Projects, and I'm not saying let those people out. I'm like, let them out, but I'm saying if you have a life sentence for something that you've admitted to doing, and you have this type of psychology about you, and nothing has changed, you should not come up for parole, because you are still the same psychological monster inside that you were 10 years ago. You just haven't had access to women for 10 years.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't even come up for parole.
No. And what bothers me is there's so much overcrowding in prisons in our country,
Absolutely.
but they're going to let violent offenders go,
Absolutely.
child predators go,
Mhm.
and keep fathers who can't pay child support because they don't have a job. So now they're in jail and they can't get a job.
Right.
And other non-violent offenders get more time.
Right.
It's disgusting.
Well, to me, if you're a father and you can't pay your child support, you need help getting a job. And then that once you get help getting that job, then you can garnish your wages. You know what I mean? The government gives out everything. Cell phones, gives out money to women all the time for different, having kids every 2 years. I mean,
Right.
they give out money hand over fist. Why not give out a job every once in a while for a dad who's trying to make ends meet but can't?
Because
you know?
that's a trap. I was
Mhm.
raised in this system, and they take money from the parents.
Yep. Yep.
Now, when my father wasn't working, or I should say whenever he was working, they would nab him and arrest him.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you get a job?
Yeah.
If every time you do, they're going to arrest you.
Right. They've got it worked out to where, they know how to do it.
Yep.
Okay. So have I covered everything? Because this case, we could talk about different things, but I feel like the system completely let Tiffany Sessions down, because now the man is dead, and short of finding her body, and finding something that relates to him on her person, there's no way to officially close this. And so not only did the system fail and allow this man out again, it failed and allowed another murder of Elizabeth. It allowed the 19-year-old girl to be attacked and destroyed, because, emotionally she's destroyed, because of that I hope she gets help so she doesn't stay that way. But he destroyed another life. And then Tiffany Sessions may never be solved. You know, you always have hope, and I always have hope, and I always try to give family members I work with hope. But in reality, the man that could have verified this died, and there's no way of knowing for sure. And
I
so
wonder if it was
we're
the-
left with a case that's possibly unsolvable. Today's episode is brought to you by Bones Coffee Company. You can forget about boring coffee when you drink Bones Coffee. Not only do they offer a variety of flavors such as strawberry cheesecake and maple bacon, they are a family-owned company that puts great detail not only in their coffee, but in the artwork that comes on each individual bag. Bones Coffee has a coffee club that will deliver your favorite coffee to your door every month. If that wasn't enough, they also have some amazing swag to offer. Check out Bones Coffee Company today. I'll have my affiliate links in the show notes for you.